My wedding should have been perfect, but Mom said, "Your father or me walking you down the aisle." Hello all. I don't know what else to do, so I write here. My wedding should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it left me disoriented, puzzled, and torn apart. It was about my mom, Angela, and the choices I had to make. At least the choices that may destroy everything. Now, all I can think about is how I made the right decision, and if I will ruin the relationship that is impossible to put back together. I am 26 and have been in an 8-year relationship with Gary, 26. We met in college, and from day one, I knew this was the guy. We found love fast and over the years developed a life together. He is kind and patient, and he was there for me through some of the most challenging moments of my life. When he proposed last year, it truly felt like the pieces finally fell into place. The wedding would be perfect, or so I had thought. My parents, Eric and Angela, divorced when I was 9. Having had one of those marriages that was quite so conflictive throughout, really, I did not feel the element of shock when they finally separated. As a child growing up, I thought I was living in the middle of this vast, ongoing storm where there was just too much fighting and tension and arguments hissing late into the night. So by the time they sat me down to say, they were getting divorced, really, the lingering feeling I had was one of relief. Maybe it would get better when they were no longer always fighting. But I was wrong. Divorce didn't end the fighting. It simply quieted it and became more insidious. It left my mom, Angela, with some natural bitterness. She never let go of her anger toward my dad. For years and years after that, she would say things like he had abandoned us and that he chose his own happiness over our family. I didn't understand it as a young child, but as I grew older, the depth of that resentment framing her slowly began to sink in. My father, Eric, finally found some peace. He married a woman named Shirley again when I was 16 years old. I didn't, as he was being weird with this new person while Mom hadn't remarried or seriously dated since the divorce. Shirley was excellent, trying to take my mom's place or force herself on me. She let things unfold naturally between us, and I grew to love her. She had made my dad happy. That was all I could have asked for. As I grew older, I got closer to Dad, even more so with Shirley in his life. Shirley would become a mainstay in my life, as whenever things got unbearable with Mom, I could approach her. But the more the bond between them and me developed, the more estranged I grew from Angela. Her taking my closeness with Dad and Shirley as a betrayal. The more I tried balancing them, the more that was never enough. She would find a way to remind me how much sacrifice she had to go through for me, how she was truly there for me. When Gary asked me to marry him, I knew I wanted my mom and dad to give me a way down the aisle. They were supposed to be a vital part of my life. After all, with complications and pain, they had both made me the person I was. I thought that was one way to honor them and bring our fractured family together for at least one day. I remember the first time I broached the subject with Mom. She did not say much. She nodded and smiled faintly, switching to another topic, and I had thought that meant Mom was okay with the plan. I know better now. With a bit of hindsight, finally, I see that her silence wasn't agreement, but simmering tension, just waiting to boil over. It wasn't until about 2 months before the wedding that everything started coming apart. I was over to Mom's for dinner, and on that count, all was pretty normal. We discussed the wedding plans, venue, guest list, flowers, all perfectly normal. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell. "I have been thinking about the wedding," Angela said after clearing her throat, reaching for her strained voice. and I don't think it is fair for Eric to walk you down the aisle." I felt those words like a punch to my gut. "What do you mean? I want both of you to walk me down." I thought we talked about this." Angela shook her head, and the fork landed too loudly on her plate. "No, that is not appropriate. I'm the one who took care of you. I'm the one who gave up everything for you. Your father wasn't here for you like I was. He doesn't deserve that respect." Speechless, I managed to utter, "Mom, this isn't about who did more or less. I love you both and want you to be part of this day." Her eyes slit, and I saw resentment simmering just below the surface. "You don't understand. He left us. He left you, and now you'll let him act like the perfect father in front of everyone. Do you know how that makes me feel? What does that say about everything I did for you?" By now familiar, the knot of guilt pulled tight in my chest. Unspoken was the tension that had always been between Mom and Dad, one that invariably made me feel as though I was walking on eggshells. "Mom, I am not choosing him over you. I'm choosing both of you. This is my wedding, and I want you both to walk me down the aisle. Please, don't make this about the past." But Angela refused to take the bait. She rose to her feet, crossing her arms over her chest. "I won't stand next to him and act like all is well with the world. If he's going to be walking you down the aisle, then I won't play a part in it." It really cut deep to hear her say this. I didn't know what to say in defense to try to reason out with her and make her understand it was never about taking sides when she would not even listen. I was drained when I had to leave her house that night. I just did not know how to fix this. As weeks went by, things only got worse between us. Angela ceased calling and stopped responding to my texts. In other words, all my efforts received silence. It was as though she just shut down toward me. Meanwhile, Dad and Shirley most definitely did not have a clue as to the drama. They were so stoked about the wedding, asking whether there was anything they could do to help. I didn't have the heart, as I didn't want to drag them into it. Of course, the closer it got to the big day, the more anxious I became. Not having Mom there was a big thing, but what else could I have done? Throughout this, Gary was my rock, continuously telling me that whatever would happen, the day would still be beautiful. Deep down inside, though, I couldn't help but feel this would haunt me. The night before, we had our rehearsal dinner. Small, close friends and family only. And for all intents and purposes, it went off without incident. My dad, of course, was there, Shirley in tow. Gary's family was there. And for the most part, everyone was in good spirits. However, I could only think about the chair my mother should have sat in. Just about the time dinner was finishing, my phone buzzed. I saw it was from Angela. "I'll come if you let me walk you down the aisle. Alone." My stomach somersaulted with a wave of nausea. I turned the message over to Gary, who frowned and shook his head. "You know you don't have to do this," he said softly. "She's being unreasonable." "I know," I whispered, but not loud enough for anyone to hear me. "But she's my mom. I just can't imagine her, not there." Gary pulled me into his arms. "This is your day. You get to decide what you want. Don't let her pressure you into something that feels wrong." What he had said made much sense, but it didn't let things get any easier. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, thinking only about Mom's ultimatum. How would I choose between Mom and Dad on the most special day of my life? Whichever way I do it, I will hurt someone I love. It finally came down to the wedding day, and I just tried shaking all those nervous feelings away. This was my preparation. My bridesmaids helped me put on my dress and do my hair. The venue was perfect, the decoration was great, and the sun shone. On the surface, everything looked like it was going according to plan. On the inside, it was like I was falling apart, That is when it was getting close to the time of the ceremony. I stood in the bridal suite in front of the mirror looking at my reflection. My phone lay on the table beside me, and every couple of minutes I would turn my head to it, expecting at least some sort of message from Mom. There was nothing. Just silence. Then, it opened as I turned toward the door handle to leave. My heart missed a beat as Angela came inside. She had just been crying. Her eyes were red, and she was shaking. Neither of us spoke a word for some minutes. Then, she took my hand. "I'll walk you down the aisle," she whispered, "but only if it is just me, no one else." Her voice was soft and fractured. It could snap my resistance. I looked into her eyes and saw the pleading in them. She needed this. She needed me to choose her, and I knew what it would amount to if I did. I could feel the weight of that decision resting upon me, crushing me. My dad, Shirley, Gary, and all our guests, literally, they had just waited for me to walk down that aisle. This flashed into my head. The years of tension, the guilt, and the ever-pressing weight of being that rock that held it together. I thought of Dad, how this would hurt him. Being left out, then of Mom, there practically begging with her eyes for me to choose her. At last, I made my decision. "I'm sorry, Mother," I whispered, fighting to keep the quiver out of my voice. "I won't be able to do that. I need both of you there." She sagged down in her chair, and for a moment, I was sure that she might dissolve in front of me. Instead, she let go of my hand and silently flowed from the room. She didn't even turn around. It really was a faultless ceremony. My dad and Shirley walked me down the aisle, which was so beautiful. I should be happy, but all I could think of was the chair that should have had my mom in it. Any smile, any laughter, instinctive, yet fake. And her absence hung over me like a dark cloud. At the reception, I put on a brave face. Dancing with Gary, posing for the photos, laughing with my friends. Deep inside, though, it was empty. Then, the father-daughter danced, and my dad came toward me with that knowing look. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "I know this wasn't easy." I nodded. Words caught in my throat. Overwhelming guilt consumed me, and I knew I'd made my choice, but it didn't feel like any kind of victory. It felt like a defeat, losing something I'd never get back. The night got over. Mom never came. I didn't see her at the reception or later on. Throughout the night, I checked my cell phone for at least a call or a message that wasn't there. It seemed she had vanished from my life completely. It has been several weeks since the wedding, but I have heard nothing from her. I called, texted, and sometimes even emailed. But she completely cut me off. Whether she ever forgives me for my decision against her, or whether I ever forgive myself for not being able to make her understand, is something that I shall never know. Gary has been supportive, but I could see the strain it is beginning to take on him. By this time in our lives, we should have started living, but in reality, we carry this heavy burden of unresolved pain within us. I often replay the events of that day in my mind, thinking perhaps there was another way it could have gone. I may have looked for ways to compromise and involve her more. Maybe I should have talked more with her and explained that it wasn't about choosing her or my father, but deep down in my heart, I knew I could never be enough. What she wanted was to be thoroughly selected by me. And at a time when I did not at that time, she walked away. The last thing Mom said to me was, "If you don't choose me, you'll see what it's like being left behind." I think she meant, I have felt like I am being left behind too. Something irretrievable has been lost, and I don't know how to proceed. My dad and Shirley have been great, but still, there is that place in my life that my mom used to occupy. What's still needed is this nagging question of whether I did the right thing. Did I have a choice? Or was it just one of those No choice situations where somehow there was a way to make peace that I could not see? I don't know how or if it can even be repaired. I just know something broke, and I am unaware if it will ever be fixed. But time slips away, yet that load is never lifted off my head. Does Mom finally come back into my life, or is this the way things will be now? Fractured, unresolved, and full of regret,